Study Session 7. Normal and Abnormal Behaviors. Introduction. A normal behavior is a behavior that is in conformity with the societal norms or standard. Abnormal is a comprehensive term, meaning away from the normal. That includes other psychological descriptors such as bizarre, disordered, different, diseased, and deviant. Therefore, abnormal behavior is a deviant behavior or a behavior that does not conform to societal norms, values, or standard. In this study session, you will be exposed to the meaning of normal and abnormal behavior and criteria for classifying them. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this study session, you should be able to 1. Define what you understand by normality and abnormality. 2. Describe the criteria for abnormal behavior. 3. Enumerate the causes of abnormal behavior. 4. Highlight the types of abnormal behavior. 5. List the characteristics of normal and abnormal persons. Concept of normality and abnormality. Both normality and abnormality are relative terms or words used to describe the psychological states of an individual. They are relative terms because what is normal for some people may be abnormal for other individuals. For instance, homosexuality is normal in some tribes and is abnormal among other tribes. The terms are therefore culturally determined, hence, they vary from culture to culture or place to place. However, abnormal behavior simply means deviation from normal or socially approved behavior. It refers to behaviors such as bizarre, disordered, diseased, and deviant behaviors. Meyer and Salmon, 1984. Criteria for normal and abnormal behaviors. Some criteria are used by psychologists to decide if someone's behavior is normal or abnormal. These include statistical criterion. By this criteria, the individuals are seen as being arranged on a continuum, with normal individuals at the center and abnormal at the two extreme ends. The criteria have to do with the frequency of behavior. According to Bourne and Russo, 1998, commonplace behavior is considered normal. Infrequent or rare behavior is considered abnormal. By this criterion, unusual behavior that is highly prized, such as intellectual discovery or an exceptional athletic performance, will be considered abnormal. 2. Societal norm, conformity criteria. According to this criteria, behaviors that violate social and cultural norms are considered abnormal. Example, violation of monthly environmental sanitation, school rules and regulations, or societal laws or standards. 3. Distress as personal suffering criterion. Illness, distress, emotional and psychosocial problems of various sorts can make people behave abnormally. According to Alloy et al., 1999, if people are content with their lives, they are of no concern to the mental health establishment. If otherwise, they require treatment. 4. Adaptiveness of behavior. Abnormality can be defined in terms of the adaptiveness of behavior. This has to do with whether the behavior is adaptive, creating happiness, leading to rewards, or maladaptive, creating unhappiness, leading to punishment or preventing rewards. Maladaptive behavior impairs an individual's functioning in a particular context. Hence, it is abnormal. Here, the question is whether a person given that behavior pattern is able to meet the demands of his or her life, hold down a job, deal with friends and family, pay the bills on time and the like. If not, the pattern is abnormal. Behavior that qualify as abnormal are extremely diverse, ranging from the frenzied person about to jump from a tall building to someone who sits in the bathroom overwhelmed with feeling of sadness, to someone who hears voices, to someone who sits at home day after day, paralyzed with fear of being in a crowd. 5. Symptoms of abnormal behavior. There is a wide range of symptoms which make it difficult to formulate a single definition that fits all cases. However, symptoms of abnormal behavior may range from mild, with no long-term effects, to severe, with thought and behavior so disturbed that special care is required. According to Meyer and Meyer, 1985, abnormal behavior can be recognized based on the following 4 basic categories. 1. Behavior that is harmful to the self or that is harmful to others without serving the interests of the self. 2. Poor reality contact. Example, beliefs that most people do not hold delusion or sensory perceptions of things that most people do not perceive. Hallucination. 3. Emotional reactions inappropriate to the person's situation. 4. Erratic behavior. That is behavior that shifts unpredictably. 7.3. Causes of abnormal behaviors. Several explanations are given for what causes abnormal behaviors. Some of these explanations will be given below. 1. Early ancient explanation. According to Altmans and Emery, 1995, in the olden days, abnormal behaviors were attributed to A. 1. Demon's possession or evil spirit. 2. Gods or goddess, god of smallpox. 3. Witchcraft, juju, violation, false oaths. Example, schizophrenia, acute psychosis. 4. Insect bites. Example, bites of an insect called tarantula in Italy, causing tarantism or mass madness. B. Attempts to offer more earthly systematic accounts of the causes of abnormal behavior can also be traced to the Greek physician Hippocrates, 460 to 367 BC. He hypothesized that abnormal behavior had natural causes, specifically an imbalance of one of 4 body fluids, namely blood, phlegm, black, bile, and yellow bile. He argued that different personality styles resulted from an excess of each of the 4 perspective fluids. He believed that 1. A sanguine, cheerful personality was caused by an excess of blood. 2. Phlegmatic, sluggish personality was as a result of too much phlegm. 3. Excess black bile was assumed to be the cause of a melancholic, gloomy style. 4. A choleric, ill-tempered personality was said to result from too much yellow bile. Though the specifics of Hippocrates' theories obviously have little value today, a systematic attempt to uncover natural biological explanations for abnormal behaviors, mental disorders, is a lasting contribution. Biological perspective. This focuses on the physical components of abnormal behavior. It concentrates on the physical aspects of a disorder in an effort to understand its characteristics. According to this perspective, abnormal behavior could be due to infections or diseases such as general paresis, delirium of malaria, syphilis, and meningitis, and so on, can cause abnormal behavior in people. Mojoyola, 2000. 4. Heredity. Inheritance of genes of insanity from either of the parents can result in abnormal behavior during childhood and adulthood. Example, schizophrenia. 5. Early childhood experience. Freud argued that early childhood experiences played a central role in the development of mental illness or abnormal behavior. Example, hysteria or conversion reaction. 6. The medical model, disease model. According to this model, abnormal behavior is a disease, and each kind of abnormal behavior, like each disease, has specific causes and a specific set of symptoms. In its strictest sense, the medical model also implies that the abnormal behavior is biogenic, that is, it results from a malfunction within the body. Psychological approaches. These approaches attribute disturbed behavior pattern not to biological malfunctions but to psychological processes that result from the person's interactions with the environment. For instance, disturbed behavior may be explained by negligent upbringing, traumatic experience, too much stress, and so forth. According to Alloy et al., 1999, psychological approaches to abnormal behavior include: 1. The psychodynamic perspective, which assumes that abnormal behavior issues from unconscious psychological conflicts originating in childhood, unresolved conflicts. 2. The behavioral perspective, which holds that a primary cause of abnormal behavior is inappropriate learning, whereby maladaptive behaviors are rewarded and adaptive behaviors are not rewarded. 3. The cognitive perspective, which maintains that abnormal behavior is an outgrowth of maladaptive ways of perceiving and thinking about oneself and the environment, negative or irrational thinking and perception. 4. The family systems perspective, which views abnormal behavior as the product of discarded relationships. 5. The social cultural perspective, which views abnormal behavior as the product of broad social and cultural forces. It also examines the biases that can influence diagnosis. Learning and social learning approach. Skinner's 1953 principles of conditioning assert that behavior is a function of its consequences. Specifically, behavior increases if it is rewarded, and it decreases if it is punished. Therefore, when behavior, example aggressive behavior, is reinforced in a child by its parents, it may become abnormal behavior if he constantly engages in it. Abnormal behavior, example aggression, can be learnt by merely watching other people engage in it and being rewarded for it. Bandura, 1973. 6. Humanistic approach. Abraham Maslow, 1908 to 1970, and Carl Rogers, 1902 to 1987, were the major advocates of humanistic approach to conceptualizing abnormal behavior. According to them, the very essence of humanity is free will. Therefore, human behavior is not determined, but is a product of how people choose to act. Human nature is assumed to be inherently good. Humanistic psychologist therefore blames dysfunctional, abnormal behavior on society instead of the individual. In other words, abnormal behaviors are due to the frustration of the society. Altmans and Emery, 1995. 7.4. Types of abnormal behaviors. Abnormal behavior is often viewed as the result of underlying mental disorders. It is, therefore, sometimes regarded as mental or psychopathological disorders. Therefore, according to DSM-4 classification, abnormal behavior can be categorized in the following ways. 1. Childhood adolescence disorder, mental retardation, learning disorders, motor skill disorders, eating disorders, etc. 2. Delirium, dementia, cognitive disorder, substance intoxication delirium, withdrawal delirium, dementia due to head trauma or HIV disease, etc. 3. Substance abuse related disorders, alcohol use disorders, alcohol induced disorders, amphetamine use disorders, etc. 4. Schizophrenic and other psychotic disorders, schizophrenia, schizophreniform disorder, brief and shared psychotic disorders, etc. 5. Mood disorders, major depressive and bipolar disorders. 7. Anxiety disorders, panic disorder with or without agoraphobia, specific phobia, social phobia, acute stress disorder, etc. 8. Eating disorders, anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, etc. 9. Somatoform disorders, somatization disorder, conversation disorder, pain disorder, hypochondriasis, etc. 10. Factitious disorders. Symptoms are deliberately and consistently produced or stimulated by the patient. Example, physical symptoms like nausea, vomiting, pain, or psychiatric symptoms as delusion, hallucination, etc. 11. Sexual and gender identity disorder, sexual desire disorder, sexual arousal disorder, orgasmic and sexual pain disorder, dyspareunia and vaginismus, etc. Sleep disorders, dysomnia, primary insomnia, primary hypersomnia, narcolepsy, parasomnia, nightmare disorder, sleep tenor disorder, sleepwalking disorder, etc. 13. Dissociative disorders, dissociative amnesia, dissociative fatigue, etc. 14. Impulsive control disorders, intermittent explosive disorder, kleptomania, pythomania, pathological gambling, etc. 15. Personality disorders, paranoid, schizoid, schizotypal, antisocial, histrionic, dependent, narcissistic, avoidant and obsessive, compulsive personality disorders. 7.5. Characteristics of normal and abnormal persons. 1. Normal, well-adjusted, healthy persons. The well-adjusted, normal or healthy individuals are always found at the positive end of adjustment continuum. Most people are at the center or middle of the continuum. The normal individuals have the following characteristics. 1. The well-adjusted, normal, healthy person experiences conflicts and is not unnecessarily disturbed by it. 2. He attacks his problem in a realistic manner. 3. He is productive and creative person. 4. He carried out his daily activity with enthusiasm. 5. He relates with other people well or satisfactorily. 6. He does not run away from tasks he is capable of doing. 7. He has confidence in himself. 8. He is able to give and receive affection. 9. He recognizes and accepts his shortcomings. 10. He does not depend too much on other people for help or exploits them. 2. Abnormal, maladjusted, unhealthy persons. These groups of people are at the left end of the adjustment continuum. They are characterized as follows. 1. The abnormal, maladjusted individual is unduly disturbed by his or her problems. 2. He often solves his or her problems by denying realities. 3. He takes issues with other people on matters that cannot be helped. 4. He may withdraw from other people. 5. He is preoccupied with his feelings. 6. He is seldom aware of his shortcomings. 7. He is obsessively guilt-ridden. 8. He lacks confidence and he is also lacking in self-esteem. 9. He is extremely self-centered. 3. Treatment of abnormal behaviors. The treatment of abnormal behavior depends on the nature of the society, the criteria used to identify abnormality, and society's explanation of abnormal behavior. Alloy et al., 1999. Generally, abnormal behaviors are treated in the following ways. Exorcism. Prehistoric and ancient societies viewed abnormal behavior as a product of supernatural forces. Therefore, treatment consisted of various forms of exorcism. The idea is to coax or force the evil spirit out of the victims. Based on this, many of them were confined to prayer, noise-making, drinking special potions, stabbed or flogged, rest and exercise. Hippocrates, 460 C to 360 BC. A Greek physician introduced a gentle and dignified method of treating people with abnormal disorders. His treatment for melancholy, for example, involved rest, exercise, a blind diet, and abstinence from sex and alcohol. Bloodletting, bleeding. In the 2nd century AD, Galen, another Greek physician who practiced in Rome, showed that the body's arteries contained blood. These discoveries led to the practice of bleeding the mentally disturbed in the hope of restoring the proper balance among the humors of the body. Spiritual healing. The Middle Ages was a period of ardent religiosity. Insanity, like all other things, was thought to be controlled by supernatural forces, and many of the insane were handled accordingly. Some were taken to shrines, prayed over, and sprinkled with holy water. Others were starved and flogged in order to arouse the devil within. Women believed to be witches were burned to death in witch hunts. However, some of them were probably psychologically disturbed. The asylums. In the 18th and 19th centuries, hospitalization of the mentally disturbed became increasingly common. However, conditions in the asylums were typically cruel and degrading. In the late 18th century, people like Philip Pinel and William Turkey helped in reforming institutional care. They stressed the need for a peaceful environment, useful work, and dignified treatment. Their approach came to be known as moral therapy. Hospital, in- and outpatient treatments. In the 19th century, Dorothea Dix initiated reforms in hospitals for the emotionally disturbed. Meyer and Salmon, 1984. With the efforts of Dorothy Dix and others, many hospitals were built in the 19th century, but these institutions did not live up to the hope of the reformers. Moral therapy was replaced with custodial care, and mentally disturbed people were isolated in prison-like institutions. In the past, tranquilizers, psychological treatments such as psychoanalysis, abreaction, hypnosis, insulin therapy are major treatment modalities for abnormal behaviors. The modern treatments of choice include antipsychotic drugs, antidepressants, electroconvulsive therapy, psychotherapies, occupational therapy, diversional therapies, and so forth. Study session summary. In this study session, we explained that normal behavior is a behavior which is in conformity with the societal norms, values, or standards. Abnormal behavior, on the other side, is a behavior that deviates from the socially approved behavior, we observed that there are several causes of abnormal behaviors, among which are demonic possession, witchcraft, heredity, imbalance of body fluids, early childhood experience, and so on. End of study session 7. Thank you for listening.